Hi guys,
Hi,
Miss O'Leary here.
and Miss Mahler.
We thought it would be really cool and different to team up and do something different for our English classes. We really hope that you're surprised. I know our glorious voices are just what you wanted to hear right now. We are going to be reading a short story called Climbing Skull Mountain, and we have this really neat picture here for you. It is obviously a skull, and I don't know if anybody can tell what kind of animal skull that is. It looks like it is, it's hard to tell, but you use your imagination to decide if you know what animal that is, and if you do, let us know later. But behind the skull is a picture. I don't know what you think that is, but Ms. Mahler, what do you think about that picture behind the skull?
Well, it looks like the setting takes place in some sort of desert or some sort of dry area, and the clouds look kind of stormy. So I wonder if there's going to be some sort of bad weather happening in our story.
That's a really good point. I don't know. I'm excited to find out. So maybe we could start by sharing some vocab so they know what some unfamiliar words are.
Sure, great idea, Miss O'Leary. Let's go over some of the vocab.
All right.
Hi, Scope readers. There are 5 bolded vocabulary words throughout the story, Climbing Skull Mountain. Before you start reading, let's look at the definitions of these words together. Follow along on your vocabulary words and definitions handout as I read the words and definitions aloud. 1. Dilapidated. Adjective. Something that is dilapidated is in very bad condition because of age, wear, or neglect. A basketball court that has rusty old hoops with no nets and weeds growing everywhere is dilapidated. 2. Mesmerize. Verb. Mesmerize means to fascinate or completely hold someone's attention or interest. A dazzling fireworks show might mesmerize you. Watching paint dry would not. When you are mesmerized, you are so interested or amazed that you don't notice or see anything else. 3. Strewn. Adjective. The verb strew means to spread or scatter something all over an area. A storm might strew broken twigs and leaves all over your yard. Strewn means untidily scattered, as in, confetti was strewn about the kitchen table at Kate's birthday party. 4. Traipse. Verb. To traipse is to travel by foot in a slow and sort of aimless way. You may have a purpose for walking, say shopping around town for a new backpack or exploring a museum, but you're walking without a specific path or plan in mind. You're wandering. You might traipse around a mall all afternoon with your friends. You wouldn't, however, traipse to the bus stop if you were running late. You'd probably run. 5. Transfix. Verb. If you are transfixed by something, you've become motionless with horror, wonder, or surprise. Your little brother might be transfixed by animated movies, staring at the screen, frozen as if under a spell. A deer might stand transfixed in the headlights of a car. Does this definition sound a little familiar? Transfix and mesmerize are very similar in meaning. Someone who is transfixed is mesmerized, in that they're gripped by something. But someone who is mesmerized is not necessarily transfixed or unable to move.
Now that we have gone over the vocab, if you come to one of these words in the story and you're not sure what it means, please go back to the vocabulary sheet and look at the definition.
Thanks, Ms. Mahler, for the great tip about the vocab. Going back and checking words sometimes is really helpful, especially if we're unsure of the meaning. Moving on, I think now is the perfect time to introduce our short story, Climbing Skull Mountain by Kristin Lewis. Ms. Mahler, are you ready for this one?
I am so ready for this one. I love the little sentence underneath the title. You won't come back the same if you come back at all.
Ooh. Something crazy is going to happen.
I'm excited.
All right, ready when you are.
Climbing Skull Mountain. You won't come back the same if if you come back at all. By Kristin Lewis. Back then, I didn't talk much. My big brother Jordan did enough of that for both of us. When he talked, I listened. When he had an idea, I followed along. That's just how it was, at least until that summer day before 8th grade. The day began with Mom confiscating our phones and ordering us to go outside. After Mom left for work, Jordan turned to me. "We're going up Skull Mountain," he announced. I gave him a look. It was a terrible idea, even for him. "Eddie, please," Jordan snorted. "Don't tell me you believe all that stuff about ghosts." I shrugged. We all knew the story, that anyone who tried to take anything off the mountain would suffer a terrible fate. Legend had it that hundreds of years ago, some explorers found rubies up there. They returned with pickaxes to cut the gems out of the rocks. But a sudden storm buried them alive. No trace of them was ever found, except for one thing: a chipped and mangled pickaxe. Now, when the wind blows, people say you can hear a clang, clang, clang coming from Skull Mountain, as if those men are still up there with their pickaxes, doomed to bang away at the rocks forever, as punishment for trying to take what did not belong to them. It was nonsense, of course. I'd never heard any clang, 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 and the mountain was only a mile from our house. Still, I didn't want to go, mostly because Mom said it was off limits. But when Jordan opened the door and said, "Let's go," I didn't say anything. I just followed him. Jordan and I traipsed down a dirt road until we came to the foot of the mountain, where a dilapidated wooden fence stretched as far as we could see in either direction. A faded sign read, "No trespassing." Jordan climbed the fence easily. "See," he said when I pulled myself over the fence at last. "No ghosts." Then off he strode, little clouds of dirt puffing up around his feet. Jordan was already 6 feet tall, and I had to jog to keep up with him. It was miserably hot. There was no shade, no trees, not even a bush, only rust-covered dirt strewn with rocks the size of basketballs. After an hour, we stopped by a boulder to drink some water and catch our breath. "What's this?" Jordan pointed at something white on the ground, something with empty eye sockets and a jaw full of mean teeth. "A coyote skull," he said, answering his own question. Jordan bent to pick it up. "Don't!" I burst out, startled by how loud my voice was. Jordan ignored me and picked it up anyway. The moment his fingers touched the skull, the sky went muddy. It was as if someone had turned down the sun. Jordan didn't seem to notice. He just stared at that skull, mesmerized. I wanted to tell him to put it down. I didn't like all that death in his hands. But before I could think of what to say, boom! Thunder cracked across the sky. A howl of wind whipped the dirt into a blinding swirl. "Run!" I shouted, shielding my face with my arm. Jordan just stood there, transfixed. I grabbed his hand. Still, he didn't budge. Sand filled my nose. It snipped at my skin like thousands of tiny scissors. With all my strength, I charged down the mountain, hauling Jordan behind me until clang, clang, clang. And then louder. Clang, clang, clang. Suddenly, I knew what I had to do. I turned back to Jordan, yanked the skull from his hands, and threw it as far as I could. And just like that, the clanging stopped, and the storm dissolved into a calm blue sky. "It hurts to open them," Jordan moaned, covering his face with his hands. His eyes had been scratched up badly by the sand. It would be days before they healed. "Keep them shut," I told him. "Where's my skull?" he asked. I spied it in the distance, next to a large rock. It seemed to be watching us. "It's gone," I lied. "I'm going to lead you down now." To my surprise, Jordan didn't argue with me. I took his hand and helped him to his feet. I was careful to walk slowly so he could keep up.
I really hope that you all like the story. I know that Miss Mahler and I really like it as well. I thought maybe we could have a little discussion about it. Miss Mahler, is that okay with you?
Absolutely. I would love to talk about the story.
I was wondering, I know that So they have this skull that they found, and it seems like things get a little crazy when they're touching it. It almost is like there's some sort of spell on the skull. Do you feel like the place was haunted or something like that?
I think maybe the place could have actually been haunted. It says in the story that the explorers found some rubies up there, and rubies are a very expensive kind of gem. So when the explorers tried to go back and get the rubies, unfortunately, they could not return and they were never found again. So I think that there is definitely something protecting the rubies and all the other gems on this mountain.
Good point. I really agree with you.
In addition to the story telling us about the explorers, the story uses onomatopoeia, which is when they use sounds instead of words. So even though in the story it does not say that the pickaxes are making noise, we do see the words clang, clang, clang. And again later, it's all in caps, clang, clang, clang. So this shows us that the characters in our story are hearing the pickaxes even though they may not be there.
Okay, so we know that we have these two brothers, Jordan and Eddie, and we know that Jordan is older, Eddie is younger, and they seem really different. I know there's a lot of ways we could probably describe them as characters. I was just curious, Miss Mahler, who do you feel like you are more similar to? Would you say that you're more like Jordan or you're more like Eddie?
I think that I would consider myself more like Eddie at the beginning of the story. I know that I would not want to go up Skull Mountain if my brother asked me to go. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat. And also when I was younger, I used to follow my older brother around and listen to whatever he said. So I think that I'm like Eddie in that sense that he always listens to his older brother Jordan, or at least at the beginning of our story. How about you, Miss O'Leary?
I don't know. I'm kind of torn because Jordan is kind of like the take charge kind of guy. And I feel as though I can totally relate to that. I know that my students probably also agree that I like to be in charge. And it just kind of is in my nature. But at the same time, growing up, I too was a younger sibling. I have 4 older siblings and just 1 younger brother. And I always wanted to be like my older sibling. So I kind of think I have a little bit of both Eddie and Jordan inside of me, depending upon what we're doing.
Very interesting, Miss O'Leary. I like that you picked both characters instead of just one.
Thanks. All right, now that we read, I feel like it's a good time to answer a few questions about climbing Skull Mountain. In your Google Doc here, it's probably best if you just type right on it, and we will give you time in between each question to do so. If you are following along with us, which we hope that you are, and you're not finished a question, just press pause, finish typing up your question, and then press play again so you can catch up with us where we are. We don't want to rush anybody with your typing. The first 2 questions here I have with a quote that says, "Back then, I didn't talk much. My big brother Jordan did enough of that for both of us. When he talked, I listened. When he had an idea, I followed along. That's just how it was." So my first question for you is, how would you describe Jordan? And my second question for you is, how would you describe Eddie? So don't forget, we're using descriptive words, and you don't have to use just one. Maybe give us a couple adjectives that describe each brother. Okay, we'll give you about 30 seconds to do that, so go ahead.
All right, now we're going to move on to question 3. If you did not finish question numbers 1 and 2, please pause the video, finish typing your answer, and then come back and join us. For number 3, I want you to look at this quote from the story. After Mom left for work, Jordan turned to me. "We're going up Skull Mountain," he announced. I gave him a look. It was a terrible idea, even for him. Would you have gone with Jordan? Why or why not? Now, this question has 2 parts, so you need to answer either yes or no if you would have gone with Jordan, and you also need to tell us why or why not. We'll give you another 30 seconds to answer this question. Okay, if you're not finished with that question, please pause the video, finish typing out your answer, and then join us again.
Okay, so number 4 goes along with this question. Now when the wind blows, people say you can hear a clang, clang, clang coming from Skull Mountain, as if those men are still up there with their pickaxes, doomed to bang away at the rocks forever, as a punishment for trying to take what did not belong to them. What were they trying to take? Go ahead.
If you're not finished, please pause the video and finish typing your answer. Let's look at the next question, number 5. Jordan and I traipsed down a dirt road until we came to the foot of the mountain, where a dilapidated wooden fence stretched as far as we could see in either direction. A faded sign read, "No trespassing." What should the boys have done according to the sign? Go ahead and answer that question. If you're not finished, please pause the video and finish typing your answer.
Okay, number 6. But before I could think of what to say, boom, thunder cracked across the sky. A howl of wind whipped the dirt into a blinding swirl. And so the question is, do you think the thunder was because of the skull, or was it simply a coincidence? Go ahead and answer that, please.
If you're not finished, please pause the video and type the rest of your answer. Last question, number 7. To my surprise, Jordan didn't argue with me. I took his hand and helped him to his feet. I was careful to walk slowly so he could keep up. So how did the roles of the brothers change by the end of the story? Go ahead and answer this question. If you are not finished with this question or any other question, please pause the video now. Do not go forward until you have finished all questions.
So I really did like that story. However, I feel like the end of it didn't really do it for me. I mean, I just have so many questions. Like, what happened after the storm? Did they ever go back there? I mean, what was up with the storm? Why did that happen to the boys? There's just so many unanswered questions. Do you agree, Miss Mahler?
I do agree. Like, I want to know, why did that storm all of a sudden disappear when they dropped the skull? What happened on their way back home? Did they make it home okay?
So many questions. I think it'd be really cool to share something that you wrote, Miss Mahler.
Yeah, so I came up with my own ending of the story, and I just kind of played with my imagination and thought of what might happen after what we read. So I'm going to read my ending to you guys. The next day, Jordan wanted to go back and get the skull. Even though the sand scratched up his eyes and he could not see well, something was pulling Jordan toward that skull. "You're crazy if you think I'll go with you again," I yelled. "There's a reason for the no trespassing sign." "Fine, I'll go by myself then," Jordan replied. Before I knew it, Jordan started for the mountain. He was determined to find that coyote skull and bring it home. All afternoon, I worried about my brother Jordan. The hours seemed to drag on and on. I kept thinking about the storm yesterday and how difficult it was to make it back home. I had many other frightening thoughts. What happens if he gets lost? What if there's another storm? I decided I did not want to wait around any longer. I wanted to go find Jordan and make sure he was safe. I walked down the dirt road and made it to the fence with the no trespassing sign. I carefully climbed the fence and started to look around for Jordan. In the distance, I could hear some strange noises that sounded like growling. I followed the noises until I realized what it was. Coyotes! I started to run back towards my house when I heard Jordan yell, "I'm over here! The coyotes have me surrounded! Please help!" I quickly turned around and saw my brother holding the coyote skull with 5 hungry coyotes around him. I was terrified, but had to think fast because this was a very dangerous situation for both of us. I screamed out to Jordan, "Throw the skull as far as you can! Maybe that's what the coyotes want!" With as much strength as he could muster, Jordan threw the coyote skull off into the distance. Thankfully, the coyotes followed. Jordan ran back over towards me. Together, we ran home and never looked back. That was the last time Jordan refused to listen to me. He learned from his mistake and will now trust me, his younger, more careful brother.
Wow, Miss Mahler, you are a great writer. I am really impressed with how creative you are. I love your ending.
Well, thank you, Miss O'Leary. Well, I'm very excited to hear what you guys want to come up with for your endings. For your assignment this week, Miss O'Leary and I want you guys to come up with your own ending to the story. Your ending needs to be 5 or more sentences long.
We know that you are super creative and can do just as great of a job as Miss Mahler did. So like she said, we're really excited to read your ending.